Good afternoon, everybody. Now into the month of November. It has been a month of growth, a month of sustenance, and a very fascinating one, to say the least. And I'm very excited to get into all the things that have happened, all of the developments, and of course, all the wacky stuff going on in the world with recurring guests, returning guests, my friend, my brother, Christian Villegas. Welcome back, my guy.
Hey man, it's good to be back. Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you too. It's always a time. One of the reasons I enjoy talking to you as much as I do, I think if we had to put a number on how many hours I've spent actually talking to you, it would be an incredible amount. But nobody quite understands and articulates ideas the way that you do. And of course, you're my brother. I love it. I love having you on. Love discussing all this stuff with you.
Kindred spirits, man. There's
In good,
always been.
exactly, kindred spirits. So I think first and foremost, just to kind of recap some of the stuff that's gone down, and I do want to start off by saying and welcoming all the new listeners that have come in because of the recent episode I did with Nicholas. Nicholas Schreck recorded with him a few weeks back and dropped this episode this past week of Halloween. It's fantastic, and I've loved reaching out and receiving messages from all of you and speaking with all of you. I love the reception. I love the warmth and goodwill you've all spread, and the love that you've shown to not just that episode, but to the show as well. Very grateful for all that. But I know you, Christian. Nicholas was, and you can hear this in the episode that I recorded with him.
Yeah.
He was a very big source of inspiration for the both of us. Him and the lectures that he's done on his own in recent years, as well as the interviews that he did with Bob Larson, with his then wife Xena, and a lot of the work that he did with during the Satanic Panic period in the 80s and 90s. That was just so incredibly fascinating to actually get to sit down and speak with someone who was there and on the front lines, even though his own personal beliefs didn't quite align with that. What did you think of that discussion, and what thoughts do you have about it? Like any questions or anything like that?
Oh, well, of course, I have a lot to say. I mean, first of all, let me just say that hearing you and him talk on the same podcast, uh, I mean, I couldn't believe I was hearing his voice and your voice and you guys talking. It was like, it was one of the things that we had dreamed of, I know, because especially me and you, we used to listen to his podcast, not his podcast, but the interviews all the time. I mean, one of the most famous ones for us was the first Satanic Family interview by Bob Larson, which is a very interesting one. I'll even pull it up sometimes and have a cup of coffee and a cigarette and just listen to that because it's just so funny. And Bob Larson's rants and so there's that, and then there's also um, as far as topic wise, there's a lot to be said. I can't just pick and name a certain topic that really uh, popped out to me the most.
Oh, trust me, I know.
Yeah,
Homeboy's a
right.
book. There's so many things that you could possibly speak about, and there's just so many different topics to cover. That's why one of the things I was kind of concerned about, at least when I was actually sitting there speaking with Nicholas, I was wondering how I was coming across, like what my performance was like, because
Yeah,
I was like, man, I was a little more anxious than usual when talking to Nicholas, because I knew not only was this someone who I had a lot of respect and admiration for and just wanted to learn from, but there were so many different topics to cover. There was the Manson case, there was his work with Radio Werewolf, there was all the writing that he's done, even the recent acting that he's been doing, even the stuff he
and
did in the
everything
80s,
in between. Everything in between. It was just
everything.
because you know this guy, Nicholas Schreck. You know he's been around. Like I mean, I don't even mean around the fucking world. I mean around hell, fucking universe. To whatever metaphor you want to take that to, whatever degree. But that it's so much to talk about too. One of the topics that did pop up to me too, or that did come out to me the most was sorcery and America being cursed and it being karmic. Second was the conspiracies with Charlie Manson, and that was just all. To me, I know for me and you, that's like that warms and gives us the butterflies in our stomachs, and you can feel the coffee going through your veins, and it just, especially me and you being into not just murder history, but us being in love with investigative history and crime scenes, and it was a pinnacle, man. It was a good podcast, and it was fucking juicy, and it was there. It was just
Oh,
it
oh,
was just fucking there, and I wish I was. Tell the truth, I wish I was having an Irish coffee with the fucking podcast, man. I was at work though. I was like, fuck, dude, I should. You know what I mean?
I totally understand what you're talking about. I mean, his work with the Manson case has been so, and that's the thing with Nicholas too, and is among, he's among other characters. There's a lot of people who are in their 50s, 60s who have been around for a very long time and who have a
All right.
very wide variety of work and topics that they've covered. Christopher Hitchens was one of them. Rest in peace.
Mhm.
Christopher Hitchens was someone who covered so many different topics: the Iraq War, political corruption, wrote about atheism and philosophy, and there's just so many different topics that he covered, but he was known primarily for this one thing. And towards the latter end of his life, it was his work with the atheism community,
Right.
being one of the big figures of the new atheism movement in the early to mid 2000s. Nicholas is sort of among the same breed, of course, not different topics, but his work with the Manson case was so extensive. Like, I don't think, of course, I believe his name's Tim O'Leary. Don't quote me on that one, but there was another investigator who was looking into the Manson case and was trying to draw all these different CIA connections with like MK Ultra, and
Right.
how Manson did in fact use the hypnotism theory that Bugliosi put forward, only influenced by the CIA and their ulterior motives as well.
Mhm.
And aside from that, though, Nicholas is the one who really has been involved in this case for over 30 years at this point. Like, you don't write a 1,000-page book like the new edition of the Manson file that's coming out without sitting there for decades as a friend, as a confidant of Charles Manson, arguably someone who knew him better than anybody else, aside from, Black Wolf and a few other friends that he had.
Right.
It's just, there's just so much to cover with that particular case. The Roman Polanski narrative, the Tex Watson involvement, which Nicholas himself said this is really the Tex Watson murders. These aren't the Manson murders. Manson kind of takes a back seat.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And the thing about it too is that it all comes together. I mean, if you can get politics and conspiracy and sorcery and karma, that podcast pretty much made a clearer picture in terms of putting those together. Because when it came to Charlie Manson and situations like that, you always think to yourself, at least for me and you, and like there has to be more to the story. Like shit can always be just, oh well, he was crazy and he killed these people and he was a really good speech artist and that was that, and he's in prison now. It just seems like a bunch of bullshit. Like you can, for me, I can just hear bullshit. You can just fucking hear it. And for Nicholas, it was at a one night with want to go ahead and take this over, but when he went out to dinner with it was him and Xena, and they took him out to dinner. Who was that exactly again?
Yeah, a specific actor. I was trying to remember his name as well, but essentially what wound up happening is they went to this place called the Magic Lamp, which I believe is called. It's this dining center slash like magical meeting spot for a lot of the actors and magicians, like stage magicians. I mean, in Los Angeles, it's like their headquarters in the world, basically. Like stage actors, mimes, all that, people from that sphere go to that location to meet, to do shows, to converse, whatever. It's like one of their headquarters.
Right.
Him, Xena, and this actor friend who was actually, Nicholas had stated he was unable to name for years, because this meeting happened in the 90s, I think like 93 or so. He was unable to name him because he was still alive and still associated very much so with Roman Polanski, who was also still alive.
Right.
He was involved with them in the 60s and the 70s, leading up to this whole massacre that wound up happening on Cielo Drive. He was a friend of Polanski's and knew the details and understood the fact that this was in fact a cover-up. All the work that was being put into this case by Bugliosi to essentially cover up what actually went down there. They spun this whole helter-skelter narrative in the media and was able to push forward and make Charles Manson the boogeyman of the whole situation, instead of focusing on Tex Watson and Sebring and Folger and their drug network that they were running out of the Cielo house where the murders took place.
That's the thing too. How deep does it all go? Because it goes pretty fucking deep.
Exactly.
Who the fuck else is involved? Like you're talking like Jesus. Next thing you know, fucking goddamn. Especially these days, you're hearing shit about Hollywood, and it's not even under the covers anymore now. Like I'm talking about right now. It's like in the news, Hollywood's being exposed. Child sex traffickers left and right. People, Donald Trump, and everybody's just being thrown into the mix. And even though a lot of names and everybody's just shouting at this point in time in history right now, everybody's just shouting out names and blurs and slurs, and it's like there is a root to it. There is a root, but it's just so much shit that goes into it. You know, for one to think about it, it's mind-boggling, and it's also very confusing to even try and track it. Because in my opinion, it'd be a pretty hard fucking thing to track. Like, what's like the fuck is going on? Like, what the hell? And one of the things that Nicholas Schreck pointed out too was methamphetamines, and whether or not that was part of a karmic thing for America, because methamphetamines are pretty big in America. That's a fucking fact. You know, might as well along with the rest of the world. But as far as how deep it goes in the cover-ups, that's the one thing that's prominent is the cover-ups and who it affects and how it alters history. Not only that, but in so doing that, ironically, you're going to have people that are going to want to investigate that. They're going to want to see, this sounds kind of bullshit. What the fuck really happened? Because motherfuckers got connections, you know? Somebody's going to say fucking something. Because, especially with me, if I hear some shit, I'm like, all right, well, fuck it. Fuck you. I'm going to say what's on my goddamn mind either way, you know? If something's going to get said, and it's going to be that one word or sentence or two that's going to have people thinking and going around being like, well, you know what? I'm going to point my finger at this person. I'm going to bring up this old case and see. Let's see how deep it goes, you know? So I think that's what we're seeing right now. I think in this, exactly at this moment, as we speak, there's old cases being dug up, murders being reinvestigated, cover-ups being uncovered, and that's really prominent right now. It's so uncovered that it's even hitting the mainstream media, you know, and you can see everybody shouting about it. You can hear it. You can even at work, people who are even miles and thousands of miles away from a particular case that was brought up, and say in Los Angeles, you hear it in New York, you know, and that comes to communication. But you gotta remember, back in the day too, back in, you know, even before this era, you had or this decade, communication wasn't that strong. You know, like there was a case, I think in North Carolina, where there was a body being found on the railroad tracks. You know, not even 10 miles down, there was another body down the tracks. And then you got 30 miles down, you got another body down the tracks. Only until 30 years later, they were able to put together, hey, wait, this is probably the same guy. Because somebody said, wait a second, that same murder happened around my house, 10 miles down is where I live, past fucking Norwalk, whatever you want to call it. People start thinking about shit, and they start making the connections. Either way, it's going to be a lot harder to try and cover up shit because of communication. And that's what we're seeing right now. People are starting to talk more. People like me and you are starting to investigate shit, question things, and it's going to be so chaotic that trying to cover it up is going to be the least of anyone's worries, and it's going to be more about like, well, what am I going to do to silence my part in it, to make sure nobody knows that I was involved in it, you know? Because let's be honest, humans are like that. We will do anything it takes to cover our own fucking ass, no matter what, and that's a fucking fact, man. That's fucking nature. That's human nature, as a matter of fact. Maybe not everybody's like that. Be damn sure, fucking everybody's out to cover up their own ass, no matter what. Now, no matter how much of a small degree to a big degree, and that is what's happening right now. Everybody is running around trying to cover shit up, and now it's being exposed, especially with these fucking elections going on. People are going crazy, shouting shit out, pointing people out, even exposing themselves just to incriminate their own friend that they used to associate with, or their own partner.
It's this sort of like blind allegiance to an ideology, essentially ideology. Ideologies have been a major focus, and using ideologies to essentially turn people onto your side or use them to think in accordance with this one philosophy moving forward.
Right.
If you can get somebody to align themselves 100%, to identify themselves with an ideology instead of using themselves as an extension of the ideology and finding themselves, okay, I happen to agree with this. If you can take someone from that position to this ideology is going to save the world, it's going to save humanity, and anything, the ends justify the means, essentially. When you can get people to align themselves behind an ideology, which we're very much seeing in this election, on either one of the sides, whatever side you want to land on, you are aligning yourself with an ideology and pushing forward with it to the most of your ability. And I think that's something that Nicholas actually kind of covered when he spoke about the United States being on cursed land. And I think we're starting to see that a lot. And, you know, he focuses a lot on sound and the relationship of sound to everything. Essentially, it's a form of spiritual communication. And the communication that we're seeing now and the widespread availability of it in things like social media and the internet, there's obviously a lot of downsides to that in the form of misinformation and misunderstandings and truth being skewed, because people tend to rely more on the fact that they happen to see this thing that they themselves already agree with, therefore it's truth. There's a lot of critical thinking that's being lacked in the social media age. But that also means one of the positive things about it is that people are in communication more all across the world.
Right.
So when it comes to covering things up like murder cases, like conspiracies, like the Manson case, it's a lot more difficult to get around. It's a lot more difficult to actually pull this off because there are so many different people and lines of communication open that weren't originally open in the 60s when this all happened. Now,
Right.
interestingly enough, one of the things I heard Nicholas say one time in a different a different interview he did, someone asked him, if you had to one question, like out of all of your research that you've done for over 30 years, what is one thing that you wish you knew about this case? His response was, I want to know just who was being covered here. I want to know whose ass was really being covered, because all of this corruption that was exemplified in the Manson case, in the cover-ups, as well as the Black Dahlia case, which we also discussed, which Pew Eatwell wrote a wonderful book about. If you're curious at all, anybody listening, if you're curious about that particular case, read Pew Eatwell's book, Black Dahlia, Red Rose. Phenomenal coverage of that event.
Right.
And there's a lot of parallels between that case and the Manson case in terms of them both happening in Los Angeles and the extent to which political, social, and power structures, the extent that they went to cover the whole thing up and cover their own asses. But with the Manson case specifically, he wanted to know whose ass was being covered, because you got a bunch of people that show up to the Cielo Drive house high out of their minds, drug deal goes wrong, and wild slaughter occurs, as often happens with people who are high off their asses on methamphetamine.
Right.
That's pretty typical. You can walk down the street here in California pretty much anywhere, and there's a drug deal or a murder going on somewhere.
Hell, fucking San Francisco, you can pick up a goddamn needle off the goddamn street. And shit, if you're fucking crazy enough to use that shit, no matter where it's fucking been, because people do that shit, no matter where it's been. I mean, that's a good example right there. San Francisco, anywhere in America, pretty much. And I feel like the general conception is it can be kind of difficult to obtain methamphetamines and drugs and needles and all that shit, but really, it's not. It's not, especially growing up in a neighborhood where I used to have a lot of friends there used to be a lot of meth heads, as a matter of fact. Especially in that part of the podcast where Nicholas Schreck describes the actions of a meth head, of somebody addicted to meth. The multiple stabbings, like what was it, 26 stab wounds to a single chest. That's clear behavior of a meth head. And he was right that it is a violent drug. It's not like LSD. It's not like a
Mushrooms or anything like
yeah,
that.
it's not like mushrooms, because like anybody that talks about mushrooms, I'm not gonna tell you I want to fucking kill this motherfucker. Like, no, it's a very unnatural drug. That's exactly what it is. It's very unnatural.
Drugs, yeah, the psychedelics are essentially forms and means of spiritual expression or gaining spiritual insight or knowledge.
And anybody listening to this podcast, I encourage you to read the book Fruit of the Gods. Okay, and if you want to go back in history, the most, I guess you want to say, the most successful nations and races of today's society were civilizations that used LSD and shrooms. That's my personal observation on it. That's my personal opinion, strong opinion, but take it however you want.
Yeah, there's scientific evidence and researchers that are finding connections and seeing that chemicals like psilocybin have a profound effect on the brain and have a profound effect on your ability to comprehend and understand the world around you and to see reality and to contemplate things. There's a lot of different things that are at play with chemicals like that. But he was absolutely correct in drawing the parallels there. The fact that drugs like methamphetamine are so toxic and so poisonous to your body, and the fact that they induce states of rage, they induce states of almost blind aggression, and that's seen a lot. I grew up around meth heads as well. I even had friends that like yourself, we grew up in the same area.
Right.
A lot of the drugs like that a lot of drugs are produced and flow into the streets, and you can see the effects. That's why people get scabs. That's why people are willing to die or put their lives on the line for the next hit.
And it's one
And
of the main factors to a ruined community. And you see that. You see that, especially
exactly.
me and you were always roaming the streets, fucking looking for the next beer to drink or some shit. And especially, not to mean to incriminate myself, but me and you being pretty active, active kids and teens and shit. I mean, I'll never. Me and you had pretty awesome fucking childhoods. No matter what shit was going on in our lives, we still fucking got out there. We did shit and we enjoyed life. But along with enjoying life and being active and running around the city, meeting friends and people, you see a lot of shit too, and you're grateful that you got to see and experience a lot of what other people are going through as well, and I can say for a fact that methamphetamines, is one of the main factors that destroys a community and a neighborhood, but why that doesn't ever get fixed because of cover-ups, nobody wants to put their big boy balls on and say, hey, fuck this shit, let's get ahead of this shit.
Exactly. And the Manson case being such a significant part of Nicholas's practice and his, career, public career, of course, that was going to be a big focus. But one of the things that I kind of wish I was able to speak to him more, which I will eventually when I have him back on, is a lot of the spiritual work that he's up to these days, being if you want to label what he does, a tantric Buddhist, but he's also maintains a relationship with the god Set, which he is known for. That's not at all a mystery. If anybody wants to take a look at his work, he's written about tantric sex magic. He's done research works on like his book, The Satanic Screen, which hopefully is going to be re-released here soon because good God, is that thing expensive to find anywhere online? It's upwards of $100+ anywhere I can find it. It's difficult to find. A lot of his works are so rare. I mean, they're so difficult to find and get your hands on. But I was very fascinated in his spiritual work because myself, we spoke, of course, about when I first met him in person. I've appreciated and respected his work as an artist, as a musician with Radio Werewolf and Kingdom of Heaven, and even the solo stuff that he's doing now. I've been such an admirer from a distance, but he lives in Germany. So I was like, okay, it's going to be really difficult to actually get to meet this guy. Mm-hmm. But when he actually showed up last year for the 50th anniversary or commemorative event, I want to say anniversary because that's a little celebratory and there's nothing to celebrate about the murders themselves, but the commemoration of the Cielo Drive Tate LaBianca case. When he came down here last year, it was like, okay, I have to go. I have to go. I have to meet him in person, even if it's for a brief second, even if it's just in passing. I need to say hi to this guy. And I remember showing up at that art exhibit in downtown Los Angeles at Lethal Amounts Studios. Anybody who's in the area, when they open back up again, go support them. They put on some fantastic work and exhibitions there. But I remember walking up and actually seeing the guy and seeing him walk across the street because I showed up super early and wanted to get in line and be one of the first ones in there. Yeah. And I remember seeing him walk across the street and I recognized him immediately. I was like, okay, perfect. Here we go. And we get into the show. He's kind of walking around, greeting and talking to people. And of course, he had friends there. So he was spending time with his friends, meeting them and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And then actually getting to the point where I was walking around admiring all this stuff. And I had my copy of the original first release of the Manson file with me, which security tried to accuse me of stealing actually before I left, which is kind of fun. And then I actually had to get the guy who was selling a lot of copies of the Manson file because they had that on sale there. I had to get him to come verify that it was not, in fact, his, even though the security guards saw me walk in with it in my hand. Yeah. But I remember walking around and seeing him off to the corner. There was like this banner and the picture that's available on the Beyond the Well Instagram of me and him, which is not a good picture of me. I look like the lighting or whatever was just looking funky. I looked like I was constipated or something. But I remember he was standing in front of that banner. And I was like, all right, here I go. It's the time. And he was talking to someone, but it was pretty casual. Like I'm pretty intuitive. So I was like, okay, this isn't someone he knows. This is someone that is just there visiting. So I walk over, I'm standing there. I'm like, okay, gotta waiting. Okay, here we go. And I walk in there and I introduce myself and we start talking briefly. And that's when he brings up the fact that he believes that America is cursed. And I'll just say now, he has a phenomenal memory because I was just one of hundreds that he met that night. And he remembered more of the conversation than I did. I was like, oh, okay, all right. And this guy is phenomenal memory for one. But I remember we were sitting there talking briefly, and that's when he said to me that he believed America's cursed, and that if you want an example of a real Holocaust, look no further in America at the way that the natives are treated and the fact that their native sacred land that we stomped out and we conquered it, sure.
But they were not ignorant to sorcery.
Exactly. They're
That's
not
the
ignorant to
that's the proof
sorcery,
that
just
popped
like
out.
all other like all other native tribes were.
Right.
And it was just we had that brief moment where we spoke, and we talked a little bit about that, and that was essentially the end of it. I signed the copy of the Manson file, and I was just expressed a lot of gratitude and was very grateful for the fact that I got to meet him, and went around, walked through the rest of the show, and it was a great night. And then there was something nagging in me, and Beyond the Well was a thing at that time, but it was a lot less structured. There was no release schedule. It was very scattered. I didn't really quite have an understanding of what it is or what I wanted to say. And I went home that day and just elated, excited about the fact that that whole thing happened, of course. And the following year ensues, and there's something in me that's like, once Beyond the Well was starting to take shape and really grow its roots as a concept, as an archetype, as a means of research, as a means of putting forth magically energized conversations that wouldn't have otherwise happened, all centered around the concept of being willing to sacrifice something for the pursuit of knowledge. Of course, look at the Mimir as well, and Odin sacrificing his eye, and of course, there's many other lines of thought and reasons that can go into that, and many more philosophical and mystical truths that you can find in that story. But that's the archetype that Beyond the Well was founded in. And since this whole thing started up again, I was like, I'm going to cross paths with Nicholas once more. I know it. I don't know when, but I know it. And it eventually happened. I made some innocuous posts on social media just sharing. He was promoting the third and final edition of the Manson file, and that it was open for pre-order. So I went and promptly pre-ordered my copy because I want to get that shit. And I shared it on social media, and I was like, oh, it was pretty in passing. I was like, okay, oh yeah, I'd love to have you on and talk about your new projects. It was nothing all that personal. And he reads the message and responds, oh, I'd love to. I was like, what? I was like, okay. But
Shit.
that moment, and I spoke to you like moments after it
I
happened.
had just saw that shit, and then you messaged me, and I'm like, I fucking saw it. I fucking saw it. I go, what was gonna happen? What's the fucking plan? Like, I was like, this is fucking stuck. I was like, there's no way I'm reading this shit right now. There's no way he said that. I'm like, well, let me read this shit. I'm reading the comments, and I'm like, no fucking way. There's no fucking way.
And of
So
course,
I wasn't surprised either. I'm like, man, you know how to draw a fucking crowd, man. You've always had a way with words, but I was surprised, but I wasn't surprised. I was like, you know what? Like, if it's anybody that who can get anybody's attention in the most specific of ways, it's you. It's you. I mean, even before you started with the podcast, I know you mean you were brothers and shit. Like, you've always had good speech. You've always been a really good speech artist. But not only that, you've always known how to direct your energy towards a character. So that's one thing that pops out about you a lot. Those of you that don't know and who are hearing this podcast for the first time, or maybe not, just that's a fact about this guy right here. Boom.
and I really, of course, you're my brother, and I appreciate that. And you have a gallery of traits. And of course, this whole platform would not exist without you and your input. I mean, it's as spiritual as kindred spirits. We've walked through and marched forward through a lot of the same issues and a lot of pitfalls that life will throw at you. But as
Yeah.
committed magicians, as committed human beings to unravel the truths of the world that we live in, you've stuck by my side the entire time. And once this meeting with Nicholas was actually put into fruition, like this is actually going to happen,
Mhm.
it made me aware of a spiritual trait, of a spiritual phenomenon that I sort of knew already, but it wasn't one that I had really put the needle to. I hadn't really focused on it just yet. Because I've experienced it with you. I've experienced it with those closest to me that I have strong bonds with. And of course, those energies that you have, the seekers of the world, those who, in fact, are willing to sacrifice something for the pursuit of knowledge, whether that be personal comfort, financial security, whatever the situation is, even your livelihood. If you're willing to submit yourself to that search, it will pay dividends. And in turn, those who are also submitting to themselves to that search and are willing and open to receiving knowledge, whether it's what they want to hear or not, those same spirits are being drawn to you as you are being drawn to them. which is why I am, again, and I express gratitude as endlessly as I can to those who listen, to those who comment, to those who reach out. I admire that so much because it's an affirmation to me of the mission behind Beyond the Well, what it stands for as an identity. And beyond the conversations and beyond the truths that are revealed in having conversations like this, those truths come to life when I have connections like that I had with Nicholas and that I've had with others, Lilith, Outlaw Priestess, and Pat from Biker Witch Tattooer, who runs the incredible Vamacharis tattoo studio in New York. I've been drawn to people like that, and among others as well. It's been a platform to grow and build relationships with, and it's been nothing but fulfilling. And just this past week, after having the Nicholas conversation as well, and just being made aware of that truth, and being made aware of the fact that this is in fact a real phenomenon. Like, this is really happening. If you put yourself out there and you commit yourself to that search, you will find others who are doing the same exact thing. And Nicholas is a wonderful, probably I can't think of any other better, any more fitting description or embodiment of the Jungian archetype of the seeker, which is the same one that I am. Taken as many assessments as I could, and I've read plenty of Jung, and that's very much the category that I fall under.
I was always funny. I never read much of Carl Jung, but more of a Freud, learning about Freudian theory, and yeah, that was a lot. It's funny. Probably gonna go off on a tangent a little bit here, but no, a lot of people do think he was wacky and weird, but he actually a lot of good points in terms of not even sexist theories or theology. Really something that really pops out, and it relates to how energy is defined in terms of what we want. We put it out in really specific and not always clear ways. But if you notice, the kind of audience that we've attracted, especially you, it was always specific. It wasn't always like, hey, I'm this dude, and this is what I'm doing. It was always something you said that always connected to somebody, and they said, you know what, this guy makes sense. I'm gonna join in on this podcast. So I'm relating that to what you put out there, if that makes any sense.
I absolutely do. It absolutely does. I mean, you were the one who reached out to me initially. Like, that's what started our friendship, which I know we've spoken about before, but it's just
remember what I
hilarious.
Told you? I don't know if I just said, fuck, I'm gonna say it when I go fuck. But the first thing I said to you was, hey, I know we haven't talked since it was elementary school, but you have really nice Aryan features.
And then beyond that, which is obviously like is complimentary and very, jestery, which is very much a jokish type of thing. That's an archetype that you embody too. You're always the jester who has like a sinister twist to him, and it's always very funny to enjoy. It's always very I derive a lot of enjoyment, stuttering over my words, enjoy seeing you just interact with the world around you. That's just part of who you are. But also, and yeah, oh, and also it was, do you want to start a cult? It's also where it started too. And I was like, all right, yeah, sure. We're 14 years old. We have nothing to do with our time. Why not? But it was just beyond that, and just being made aware of the fact that this phenomenon is real, that it actually takes place. I started focusing on it a bit more and drawing more energy from it, which led to me receiving the stag, the messenger, the embodiment of that, spiritual entity and realistic, that truth of reality. That I have now on my forearm, that Pat, again, Biker Witch Tattooer on social media from Vamachara, who's I've had on the podcast a couple times. You guys have heard speak. Very well spoken and incredibly insightful and knowledgeable guy. Getting out to Idlewild here in California and getting to meet him and Lilith, Outlaw Priestess, who I just had on a few weeks ago. Phenomenal experience getting to put a face to someone people who I admire from a business perspective, business standpoint, being able to take their passions with Lilith. It's being a femdom, which is very fascinating. Had never been able to speak to someone of that creed before. It's very fascinating to see how they live and to see how she interacts with the world and how it affects her spirituality as well. And Pat, of course, who, again, you guys have heard speak, I've met in person once before last year in Los Angeles when he came down here for the very first time. Got to walk the streets of downtown LA and tell him some stories about what has gone down out here and some of the work that I've done, and just explain some of the historical landmarks and being able to build that type of connection with someone who I admire, again, from a business, but also a spiritual perspective, someone who's very knowledgeable, very insightful, who is of the same breed that you and I are, and someone who has made a living doing that. And to get out, to put a face to it, to me, it was very important. Even if it were to be brief, even if it were to be like 20 minutes of, oh, hey, guys, what's going on? It wasn't, but being able to get out and meet these people face to face was indicative of the fact that this journey, this search, this platform, this idea is really starting to take its own and take on its own momentum. And the fact that this would have never happened if Beyond the Well was never created. And this is by no means particular to me. Anybody listening, and this is a message that I've been really big on lately. Anybody listening, and I'm only in my early 20s. You and I both are. You know, we're both young. We have a life ahead of us, and we've only really begun this path. But we're paving our own way. We're walking our own path. We're creating our own path as we move along and moving through a lot of different philosophies and religious ideas and spirituality. We're developing our own movement and our own ideology and our own philosophy moving forward. But anybody listening, this applies to everyone, regardless of age, regardless of stance in society, regardless of birthright, whatever it is. You focus that energy. You do work on yourself. You sit there and you meditate. You form your own spiritual path. You continue looking inward instead of outward at the degrading, rotting world around you that is rotting because of its stance on ideology, rotting because of its lack of spiritual awareness, rotting because it has chosen the path of vacuous, empty materialism, consumerism. It is eating itself away. If you take that energy and look inward with it, you will find something, whether it's a brand, whatever. And you don't have to break it down on a business level even, but you will find your true identity. You will find yourself in the all, the true nature of reality. You will find who you really are instead of identifying and defining yourself by political ideology, by the words of others, by outwardly degraded and business-like spiritual systems that we have in the United States. Develop your own spiritual path. Look inward and you will find who you really are, and it will pay dividends. I guarantee it.
Every day is a ritual. Every day is a ritual, and it's up to you how you want to perform that ritual. You know, and it happens. We get brought down sometimes. It happens. We fall off the horse. You know, you've got cliches. It is. It happens. You know, if someone says something, whatever is the reason that you're feeling down that day, it is a ritual. Every day is a ritual. However you want to act out that ritual on that day is your will. It's your choice, and you can do that. And that pays dividends, man. It really does. Whatever you set the tone for that day, and especially your character, it draws in a lot of energy, as you said so yourself. It can draw in and it will turn a lot of people away. Your energy is not going to attract everybody, but if you put on a false identity, a false characteristic, and rootistically, if you don this cape of something you're just not, you're gonna attract the wrong energy, therefore the wrong people, the wrong things, and you're gonna fucking hate life. You're gonna fucking hate it. You're gonna probably pretend that you're loving it, but you're gonna fucking hate it. So I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. I don't give a fuck how your character is paved off by others. If they say you're too this, you're too eccentric, you're too fucking of an asshole, even if you really are an asshole. Hey, just enjoy that shit, all right? But hone in on your fucking craft, man. That's all it is, just hone in on your fucking craft. And it takes work. It takes fucking work. And you gotta work at it every fucking day and get up every morning and work on that shit. But every day is a fucking gift. And I've always had that perspective. I know you have too. Every day, no matter how fucked up life can be, I mean, life is still fucking grand, man. But it's beautiful to wake up every morning, just fucking breathe, man, and just do your thing.
You have to. That's the only, and that's one of the things that my conversation with Nicholas and with Lilith as well that outlined for me. I know Lilith was speaking about how she can fall into different states of, and this just kind of ebbs and flows with human emotion as well. But if you are someone of a spiritual creed and you claim a spiritual tradition and you work with magic or runes or whatever it is that you do, any spiritual craft that you fall under, you will find yourself ebbing and flowing within different archetypes and different emotions. And it's very important, and this also is involved with karma as well. It's very important to be aware of the fact that you are ebbing and flowing and finding yourself and correcting yourself when the time comes and when it's appropriate. Like,
Right.
okay, I need to relax a little bit. I'm finding a bit more Loki in me now than there usually is. I'm invoking spirits of trickery. I'm invoking these sorts of malignant energies, and I'm going to manifest them because I understand that there is an extemporaneous, world out there. There's a spiritual realm. There's a spiritual world, and I'm playing with these forces inadvertently, maybe, but I'm still playing that with them. I'm still invoking them in the
Right.
same way black metal musicians who even play with the satanic imagery, satanic archetypes, even if they're just playing with them, you are playing with very real forces, with very real energy. And even if you're a jokester, even if you think it's a bunch of silliness, you are still invoking very malignant forces. And you need to be aware of that. You need to be aware of the fact that even though you're in a crappy mood, you're in a crappy phase of life, you have to have the spiritual discipline and even just the everyday discipline to
Right.
correct that path. You can't find yourself falling into the pit because that pit will consume you. If you're constantly staring into the abyss, which is seen in like the whole doomer thing that's
Yeah.
around now, like these memes or whatever, and it's very sensationalized and it's very almost sexy to be in love with decay, to be in love and fantasize darkness and despair, and to fall into this pit and find yourself loving it and appreciating it and venerating it. I myself am guilty of that. I love things that are of a dark or a creepy or an esoteric or a spooky nature. I love that stuff, true crime and what have you. But in doing so, it's very important to remember that there has to be a limit. You have to put a limit on that. And you have to learn how to work with these forces in a way that is, not inherently dangerous. You have to correct yourself and have the discipline and the insight to correct your karmic identity and make that right as well, but also to make sure that you're not invoking energies that you don't want to invoke. You have to be able to discipline yourself enough to be aware of that.
And you'll know because past centuries, I think humans have been falling away from a sorcery type of lifestyle, very shamanic type of lifestyle, which is, I think that's, I very much believe that's the kind of human race we're supposed to be, not so much materialistic and materialized and consuming products and, identifying ourselves by just consuming all these products and buying all these things. Now we have to, I think humanity may have lost stuff a little bit when it came to that, but deep down we are still that. We are still that race. And any tribe, if you want to look at history, any tribe that has had a strong spiritual connection, or just nature around them, they thrived better. They thrived better socially, of course, economically.
Biological health, even.
Yeah, logical health, even too. I mean, spiritual health has a lot to do with logical health as well. If you're not thinking right up here, how do you expect to make a clear decision? You have to take care of your health. Fucking worry about a job that probably replace you in a day. If you fucking drop dead, you gotta take care of your spiritual health.
Exactly. Yes. You have to be aware of that.
That's part of my goal here in life too, and yours too. I want to help humanity get back to that sorcery culture that we once had. Because it's been demonized. Speaking
it's been literally eradicated, genocided,
exactly,
slaughtered.
Exactly, and that's like I think it's the worst genocide humanity has ever seen, or at least a lost witness to that. But it's true. That's who we are deep down inside. Everybody who even somebody who even tries to put it off or demonize it, they could still find themselves once in a while talking spiritually, because it's who we are deep down. And that's what I feel like. It's actually my main goal in life, is to help humanity get back to that culture, because we are that.
Exactly. I think exactly, and this has been exemplified in the fact that what you're saying is absolutely true. We are still those same human beings. We are still those same spiritually inclined creatures, and we are beginning to see humanity reject. Although we are in more of a secular age now in scientism, and that's really being touted as like the foolproof truth, even though it isn't. But there's, of course, a spiritual component too. That's just our nature as human beings. And one of the most beautiful things that I've been seeing is the revival of the Mexica culture in the native parts of Mexico and in America. And the indigenous tribes are really beginning to pick up steam again. And people are beginning to venerate their ancient ancestry that is specific to them. As when you're seeing this also in Europe, you're seeing this in Africa, you're seeing this everywhere. And I think that's such a gorgeous thing too, because this culture is as pure as it is. And of course, they had their warfare, they had their tribes, and of course we can approach things like that, social issues, political issues, with a more modern lens. But blending that ancient spirituality in, which was inherently, it venerates the natural world, it venerates the human being, it venerates these forces that are devoid of political influence, that are devoid of the business like Abrahamic faiths that we see in America that have taken dominance over the past
Yeah,
100 years, thousands of
this is
years.
right. Nicholas is right. It's a fucking witch hunt, and the gods of old, have been demonized. Fucking what? Fucking prayers. They've talked about it. Their gods have been demonized. My gods have been demonized. They're
They've
not
been conquered
demons.
with Bible and sword.
Exactly. Even fucking Jesus said it himself. I come not in peace, but with the fucking Bible and sword. You know, and our gods, all our gods, man, all our gods, no matter what race you are, have been fucking demonized. And even though you think you're getting to a higher humanity, you think you're getting to a higher consciousness, let me tell you, you are not exempt from skeletons in the closet. Which you can't fucking hide your fucking ancestry, all right? And people are so scared of like, oh, getting back to my old ways, you know, ancestral. It's not going back. It's not degrading your social existence into what is it? Almost people would say, well, humans were dumber back then, so that's why you had all these problems, or whatever the fuck some dumbass fuck would say. But honestly, it was all demonized, and the culture that we partake in today is a witch hunt, because that's what it is. It's a witch hunt. You know, one of the reasons why I personally love America is because you have the freedom to be whatever fucking religion you want. You know what I mean? You don't, even though, of course, you're going to have bigots, you're going to have assholes, they're going to be like, oh, fuck you, this is, you know, God's country. Honestly, though, I can still go to fucking, I can go to Museum of Death 26 times a day like we did and not be told shit. That's my fucking right. You
And
know,
you
that's
can
part of
also, yes, and you can thank of course, this is sort of taking it with a modern lens as well.
this.
These pagan tribes, these pagan cultures that are coming back and making a resurgence, venerate not the same gods, but the same forces. Like they're all part of the same umbrella. They're all part of the same diaspora there.
They're part of us.
And exactly, they're a part of us, and each and every one of us has that in us. Everybody, regardless of what culture you come from, which is what is the uniting force about it. It's not a stance on this Abrahamic religion that's about conquering and conquest. It's not about that. Even though ancient tribes like the Norse, for example, they're traveling raiders, they did do that. But they also bred with native cultures. They also set up settlements. They also lived there because, and this is, of course, a historical variance too. There's a lot more data behind that. But these cultures can be used as an instrument for more peace because they are in us all. We are all under that same umbrella. There is no country to go conquer. There is no land to go steal away and murder its residents and convert them to the one true faith. There is none of that. We
Right.
all have our own ancestry. We all have our own tribe. And if we can accept that and respect that, we can find this sort of spiritual peace and resonance among everybody, which is why I think I'll take this moment right now to condemn any branch of paganism, any branch of like heathenry. You see this a lot in the also true community too, becomes more about play acting and representing this community. And a lot of people have taken a racist spin to it. A lot of people have used it for politically motivated purposes. And that is never what it was supposed to be. It was never meant to be used as that same force. Everybody has those gods in them, everyone from all over the world. There is no right or wrong answer. Everyone has their own culture speaking to them, and we are all beautiful and unique in that. We are all united under that one umbrella. It is to be used as a force of unity, not one that splits, raids, and conquers different nations and lands based on religion or skin color or ethnicity or superiority or supremacy. None of that. None of that. I outright decry that, because that was never meant to be its purpose in the first place. That is a deviation and a bastardization of an ancient and beautiful culture.
Of course, when we evolved, I mean, people talk about that shit fucking thousands and hundreds of years ago. Well, yeah, that was law of nature back then. Nature is not fucking pretty. People forget that shit. Oh, you're a pagan. Fucking, don't you know what the Nords did? Well, don't you know what fucking Jesus did? What the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean?
You want to talk about death toll? I don't think you're going to get any better.
Yeah, I go, what the fuck are you talking about? I go, nobody is, like I said, nobody's exempt from skeletons in the fucking closet, man. But that's the fact, though. That was the law of nature. That was just the way it was back then. I'm not saying it's okay, but we've evolved from that. all right, cool, we evolved from that. But the only thing that happened that went wrong with evolving in that aspect was demonizing those gods, demonizing that part of our humanity. And that's exactly where I think humanity took a wrong toll. I think we had to go to that period of where other tribes and other beliefs were conquering each other, but that's natural. That's you're gonna have that. But we evolved pretty quickly, fairly quickly, as a matter of fact. You know,
That's sort of the whole point behind that statement is that we can find a unity now. That's why I
exactly.
find it to be such a beautiful thing that these cultures are being elevated. And if we can find a way to venerate them all and find a way to use this commonality that we all have and the fact that we do all have these cultures and these gods within us, that's the way toward peace and unity as diverse, interesting cultures that have their own way of doing things. They have their own way of view. That's the whole philosophy behind traveling, is going and seeing the world and seeing how different people all over the different world live in different nations, in different continents, under different rulerships, under different political systems. But if we can find a way to spiritually unite one another instead of demonizing and bastardizing and abusing each other under the guise of my God's right, this is the one true God, it says so in this book, and this book also permits me to conquer your land and to murder anybody that I see fit.
Yep.
This political discord and this political structure of power, which inevitably is, I read a lot of the Abrahamic scriptures and I don't see anything indicative of spirituality there. I see a book or a series of books and scribes, and all poems and literature are, but was this one that is motivated, politically motivated, misogynistic, and is written by men to control other men. I don't see a whole lot of spirituality or truth in that. And I had to actually go to the extent, as someone who was raised in this sort of this, I could say raised, everybody's raised in this sort of situation if you live in America or any of the Western civilized worlds, raised with this lens of the Abrahamic religions, and you have to take an actual stance on it. You have to research it. And I did. It was a very difficult, painful process, but I had to go back into the systems that I was born and raised in and look at them from my own lens, my own viewpoint, and cast aside everything that everybody else had been telling me. Until I did that, I didn't really have the perspective. I know you did the same exact thing. You have
Yeah.
to retread and truly experience this system before you can truly have a significant stance on it and understand where it's coming from, understand the motivations behind it. And that's my message to anybody reading right now. Get into these religions and research them and study them. Research them and study them. You may find yourself in agreement with it, or you may find yourself taking an more aggressive stance on it. Regardless of your perspective, you need to research and understand and actually know what these things are saying. Know what this book is trying to get, what message it's trying to convey to you. And that's the most important part. Absolutely. And I think that's why, a little bit of a tangent, but that's why the Gnostic traditions were demonized and slaughtered the way that they were, because they went against the grain and they put forth a message that was not politically motivated, was not meant to control people, and was actually a spiritual tradition. It actually had spiritual components in it.
It did. It did. And that was a big help to prayers too, man. Like it was I don't want to say big eye opener, but they were pretty much were for me too. Like learning about all these bands and their messages. It was pretty clear what side of the fence I wanted to be on, and it was those type of motherfuckers, those type of people, those guys that were had a message to their own culture, and I love that shit. It's beautiful, you know. Who doesn't want to be a part of the songs they were originally in? You know, I'm talking about music. I mean, you want to find a path to immortality? Shit, me being a choir, I can sing that shit forever, and that I'll never get tired of singing, because when you're up on that stage and that platform and you're singing a beautiful fucking song, and those sounds, those notes, those particular notes resonate in such a beautiful way, you feel like you can sing forever. And there's no, to me, there's no more, one of the most beautiful feelings is when you're a part of a song that where the notes interact so beautifully and they harmonize. It's like you're making not just art, but energy and sound and love. You're creating love and life, and you feel it. You feel it coming out of you, not just your mouth when you're fucking singing it, but you feel it in life. And after that fucking concert, you're coming down. You're like, man, this feels good. This was really good. I'm loving life right now. This is good. It's a good feeling. You gotta love that shit. You
I
know?
think, yeah, of course. And I think I want to round this out and reaffirming Nicholas's message, one that he shared at the end of the conversation I had with him, which is extremely resonant with me as it has been for many other people during this time. And we have the election coming up and the violence that's almost guaranteed to happen. Reject all sides of ideology, ideologies that are meant to control you.
Yep.
Reject the materialistic standards that you've been raised to venerate and to value to the extent that you have. Do the research, do the work, and turn that work inward. Research and study yourself, your ancestry, your spiritual path, whatever spiritual path you happen to be on. Research yourself, dream, and look inward. Do the inward work. And now is as good a time as any, the best possible time to outline your spiritual path that you want to proceed down. Describe as deeply to yourself as you possibly can what it is that you're searching for, and work that path out. Walk down it, march down it, sprint down it. You will have no better time than now, and the work can only be done by you.
And it's
Work can
painful.
only be done for you, and it's going to be painful. It has to be painful.
It has to be.
It has to be painful. That's the only way forward, is through pain. Take a look at the ancient texts like the Kabbalion, the Bhagavad Gita, Hermes, Hermeticism, which again I just referenced, the Hermetica. Research the Poetic Eddas, the Prose Edda of the Norse cultures. Research the Mashika culture. Research all of these things and find the unity and find the beauty in each of one of these cultures that ultimately we all are a part of. Find your own spiritual path, pave your own way, do the research, do the work, dream inward, look inward, and it will pay dividends. Again, I repeat that, it will pay dividends, I promise. But you have to put the work in yourself first. And I look forward to speaking with each and every one of you. Feel free to send your messages. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to start conversations. Feel free to do whatever it is, interact on social media, whatever it is. It's all part of this goal, sacrificing something for the pursuit of ultimate truth and for the pursuit of ultimate knowledge. We are all on that path, and I look forward to seeing and speaking with each and every one of you who wants to reach out and speak about this stuff. I enjoy it. I love it, and I live for it.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to fucking Rafael Reyes, dude. I am the feathered fucking serpent.
I have no doubt you'll be seeing Rafa on here soon.
David, how are you?
David, how are you?
Nice.
So, brother, I want to thank you again for coming on. It's always a phenomenal time getting to speak and talking to you. And we're going to have to do one of these things in person one of these days because I keep talking to you in North Carolina, but maybe when you get your ass down here in December.
Oh, yeah, I'll be here. Oh, yep, I'll be here, dude. I'll be here. Don't worry.
Sounds good.
Always a good fucking time, bro.
So, again, anybody listening, reach out on social media, do the work, do the research, and I keep repeating it. Yeah, that's a new slogan I'll use. It will pay dividends, I promise. So again, thank you, brother, for coming on here, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course, brother. Thank you for having me on.